Hey everyone, welcome back to Arsenal Pass. Today we have a pretty special video for you all. So there's recently been a deck that has made a resurgence or kind of a surgence in the meta. It's became very popular. So that is going to be Bolton Sabers. So this deck has been winning a lot over in Europe, and also I think last week in America. Well, I know in aggregate it won more than Chane, and in America it might have also won more than Chane. So Bolton Sabers is a really interesting deck, mostly because its sort of strategy is kind of it's hard to understand initially, but I think once you get it down, the deck is quite easy to sort of know their play patterns and also learn how to sort of play against it, sort of play around it and play against it. The unfortunate thing about the deck is that sometimes you literally just can't. It is for the most part a non-interactive deck, but there is a lot you can do in terms of managing your life total and trying to win the game by a certain turn to drastically increase your chances against the deck. Anyway, Hayden's got the cards laid out for us. Hayden, why don't you tell us a little about Lumina Ascension as a card and how it interacts with the sabers you got there?
Yeah, so if you haven't seen Lumina Ascension, it's a light warrior action card. It's Bolton specialization, and it says until end of turn, weapons you control gain +1 attack, and if this hits, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a light card, you put it into your soul. Otherwise, you put it onto the bottom of the deck, and you gain 1 life. And if you've charged this turn, so this is kind of the important part about how this kind of combo interacts, is that the opponent needs to charge, or the Bolton Sabers player needs to charge on the turn they go off with their Luminas, with their Lumina turns, is that if they've charged this turn, they get to attack an additional time with the weapon this turn. So it gives you basically Dorinthia's ability, but for both your sabers. So if you have 1 Lumina and you've charged this turn, you get to attack twice with each saber. If you play 2 Lumina though in a turn, you get to attack 3 times. So they could be coming in for 6 attacks with the sabers, which is where this deck really starts to get out of control. If they have three Luminas, that's 4 attacks. So it can really set up some really big turns just with this Lumina Ascension.
Mm-hmm. And just to quickly note, I think that Bolton Saber has actually been picked up quite a bit by a lot of players because it's seen as a counter to Chane. I know specifically in the era that I played in, the Boltons that played at that event, one of them was 5-0 in Chane, the other one was 4-0 in Chane, and I'm assuming the same thing is kind of happening in Europe. The interesting thing about Bolton is I actually think that one of its hardest matchups is Chane. That being said, let's just talk a little bit about what the deck is doing before it combos on you, because this is one of the most important parts. So Hayden, before you kind of reach that key, 3 cards in soul, 4 cards in soul, plus a double Lumina, what is the Bolton deck generally doing turn to turn?
Yeah, so I mean, the number one focus for this Sabers Bolton deck is getting your soul into the right position. So basically, depending on and we'll get into this as we go through like the configuration of how their combo turn looks, but the aim for the Bolton player is 3 to 4 cards in soul, depending on what kind of setup they're going to go for on that final turn. And the reason this matters is because you have a card, Beacon of Victory, which can go and find you another Lumina Ascension. So you effectively have 6 Luminas in your deck because Beacon can go and find another one. But the Beacon does require you to feed a soul card to it in order to go and get that Lumina, because it says that X can't be 0 when you play this light warrior attack reaction, which is an additional cost to play. It can banish a card from your soul, and it has to be at least 1, and then you can go find the Lumina. So you need an extra card basically if you're going to do that, and we'll show you what that looks like in total. But the aim for them is minimum 3, so they need minimum 3 to be able to go off. 4 is kind of where the benchmark is, which includes Beacon of Victory turns. It's very hard to know how you're going to go off as a Saber Bolton player until you actually get to the turn. So they're building towards minimum 4 actually, because you're going to get a card on the 4th or 5th card on the turn you go off, depending on what you've set up. If you start the turn with 3. You play a charge card on the combo turn, you're going to go up to 4. If you start the turn with 4 cards in soul, you're going to go up to 5, because you do need to charge. It's one of the most important things. You have to charge on the turn you go off, otherwise your Lumina Ascension, your whole combo doesn't work because you can't attack multiple times with the Sabers. So that's kind of where they sit. In terms of any other sort of plans, it's really around trying to chip in some damage. So a double Lumina turn, just with the Sabers, for instance, including the Gallantry Gold, which is also really key to this combo, that's 30 damage from the Sabers that they're coming in for, base damage. So that's before any sort of blocking happens, any sort of maybe extra pumps happen thanks to Bolton's ability, which gives cards gives attacks +1 if they've been blocked with an attack action, which also Centauri Sabers have this exact same text. So that's 30 damage. So it's not quite an OTK lethal, right? You can add in your charge card as well. So it's a Bolt of Courage. That's 33 damage. So you need to find some other damage during the game. So they're looking to charge some soul and chip in some damage. They get you down to, and me and Brendan have actually talked about this, 32 is like a really key sort of life threshold for a lot of decks. Below 30, that's when you're starting to look to be potentially killed in one turn. Or you go to such a low life total and your opponent gains life thanks to Lumina Ascension ability that they're able to just then see out the rest of the game through like value cards. They get a really big soul from the Lumina turn as well because they're presumably going to hit minimum 2 or 3 times. And then they can just ride that sort of soul and just play a classic Bolton deck to victory. So yeah, that's kind of the early game for them. That soul was so important.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to talk about 2 heuristics. If you're facing against Bolton, this is the most important thing, in my opinion. It's actually something I see messed up the most by opposing players, and that's that. First, you need to play a very fast game most of the time versus Bolton. This is different if you're playing a class like Bravo, or you're just not on an aggro deck. But if you're on an aggro deck, you need to go fast. Basically, you want to be presenting lethal to the Bravo player before turn 4 or 5. If you're not able to do that, they will likely be able to just take your damage and come in with that Lumina Ascension turn, which spells a pretty rough end game out for you as well. Hayden talked about a very key life total there. That's going to be 32 or 30, mostly 32 if you can swing it. So at the beginning of the game, they're going to be doing a lot of blocking. They're fishing for their cards. They're trying to find their double Lumina. I keep messing that up. Or find their beacon. But while they're doing that, they keep the 2 cards in hand and they go something like Express Lightning, charge a card. So they're keeping 2 cards, charge a card, do all this kind of stuff. So while they do that, if you can, if you're going to be gaining like maybe 2, 3, kind of a low amount of damage by keeping that 4th card when you could preserve 3 life, it's probably better to preserve the life and make sure you stay out of those, those critical ranges where you could just end up dying to the combo. That being said, while you're going fast, if you are playing a class that has access to hand disruption and, more important, arsenal disruption, which everybody does through Command and Conquer, that's going to be probably one of the most devastating things you can do to the Bolton player. If you're not playing Command and Conquer in your deck when you sit across from Bolton, you absolutely should. And if you ever have it in your hand, you should absolutely 100% prioritize attacking with that card. Most importantly, because if they are not able to block it, it will blow up their arsenal, which is probably going to have a combo piece. If they are able to block it, they might have to block with a card they don't want to, like that Beacon of Victory, like their second Lumina, something along those lines. But Hayden, I know we kind of went into it, but let's just go through exactly what the combo looks like, assuming we do have the cards we need in Soul.
So I just want to just before we get to that, I just want to caveat that piece a little bit with the Command and Conquer. I think there's a really sort of interesting interplay with the Command and Conquer, and that often you might want to leave the Command and Conquer for a turn. So you look if the opponent only has 2 cards in Soul, because the best way to time a Command and Conquer is on the turn they want to go off, because even if you don't get their card from Arsenal, you're going to force them to block with a minimum 1 card from hand, which is going to really mess up their plan. And we'll get into why that is in a second versus 4 versus 5 card hands, because they can only access 5 defense off their equipment. So even if they're on less life, Skullcap is 2, Courage is 2, Gallantry is 1. So they're going to need to block with a card from hand in order to stop that CNC. So there is some interplay where you can actually hold the Command and Conquer until the turn where it's key. And actually, I've had this happen before. Where I recognize my opponents only have two cards in Soul. They need to get to that 3rd card in Soul. I Arsenal the CNC. The next turn, I play the CNC. I actually draw into another CNC because I sandbagged that CNC for a turn, so I didn't have to miss a turn on CNCs. Play the CNC. You're hitting on the key turns. Also want to say as well, in terms of like life total threshold, it's going to really depend on what deck you're playing. So when we talk about 32, I think that's a really key one for Chane, because if you get too low on life, you're going to be blocking with Husk on that turn. But if you get too low on life, you're going to end up just dying to your Husk very quickly. You're going to die to your Blood Debt. And then it can be 30 to 32 depending on how much natural equipment you have in other decks. The less equipment you have, the more life you need to have, because those the minimum 30 is going to deal more damage to you, especially if you're playing cards in your deck that are attack actions, so a lot of attack actions, or your non-attack actions defend for 2. The prime way to do really well against Bolton is non-attack actions that block for 3. So the more of those you have in the deck, sort of a bit more life you can give away. But just wanted to share that. In terms of the combo, Brennan, so I've got 5 cards laid out in front of me here, which is a very typical 5 card. Basically, this turn laid in front of us is a very typical turn that a Bolton Saber deck would try and go off with the combo. So I'm going to talk through the hand and then just lay out what's happening here. So in general, they'll have either a Lumina or a Beacon, or 2 Luminas. So one will usually be an Arsenal because they'll find one early, they'll set it in the Arsenal, and they'll get set up for the turn. So that could be either the Beacon or the Lumina. They'll have the 0 cost charge, which is really important. It doesn't actually need to be a 0 cost charge if they also have the resource card. So I'm using the Take Flight here to represent a resource card. This would need to be a blue or a yellow though, if they don't have the Bolt of Courage or the Express Lightning or the Engulfing Light, these 0-cost charge cards. And that's because they're going to play, the first thing they're going to do on the turn is they're going to play this 0-cost charge card. They're going to charge this card. Here you'll notice we've started at 3 soul, which we said is really key, is 3. They're going to come in here. They're going to go to 4 or 5, which we'll get to in a second, around 4 versus 5 when they start the turn. And they're going to play the Bolt of Courage. Now they're going to need this resource card in order to activate the Gallantry Gold. It costs 1, so they're always going to need this 5th card to be a resource card to be able to do it. It can be a red, yellow, or blue, but if they're coming in with a charge card that doesn't cost 0, say like a Take Flight or a V of the Vanguard, then they're going to need this card to be minimum yellow because it's going to cost them 1 for the Gallantry Gold plus 1 for the charge card. So that's really important. I do want to talk about the next step, and we'll get into blocking and ways that you can kind of play around this in a second, but 3 versus 4 cards in Soul when they start the turn. So just reset this a little bit. If the Saber Boltyn player only has 3 cards in Soul, they're not going to be able to Beacon of Victory plus Lumina naturally and still be able to go off if you can block 3 Sabers. And that's because if they have 1 Lumina, we'll say the Lumina's in Arsenal, this Beacon of Victory is in hand, they come in with their 0-cost charge card. They're going to go to 4 cards in Soul. I'll just talk this through. You can see it's pretty simple. They come in with the Bolt of Courage. Say this is, you block this, you play around the beacon, you're aware of it, which is I often recommend to do if they only have 3 cards in Soul. Sorry, if they have more than 3 cards in Soul, because you want to be able to. If they have 3 cards in Soul, you want to be able to block 3 Saber attack. Because if you can do that, they're gonna find it very hard to be able to go off, and I'll show you why. So they play the beacon. They have to banish a card from Soul in order to fill that cost, and then they go and find their 2nd Lumina, which goes to hand. They can now play double Lumina, but you'll notice they've only got 3 cards in Soul. So 3 cards in Soul. This card's still in hand. They pitch their card to pay for the Gallantry Gold, breaking the chain, and now they're coming in with the first Saber, with Courage Bladehold as well. Obviously really important. So we didn't really talk about Courage Bladehold, but Courage Bladehold makes their Sabers cost 0, which is a really big part of their combo. You can't go off without it, so this gives them all the resources they need. So Sabers are all free this turn. We're going to be able to attack with 6 attacks off our Saber. So first time, they're coming in here for 5, so it's 1, 2, 3, plus 4, 5 naturally. So if you're able to block this one out, they give it go again, off the Saber Boltyn ability. They come in with the 2nd one, block it out again, go again, and now you come in with the 3rd one. And if you're able to also block out the 3rd one, sure, they can give it go again. But when they attack the 4th time, they don't have a way to give it go again because the Lumina effect, which puts cards into your Soul from the top of the deck, happens after damage. So if you're able to block out the first 3 cards and then you have 3 cards in Soul, you're going to prevent them from being able to combo the turn. So this is one of the most important things, is that if you see them only have 3 cards in hand, it's often incorrect to block the charge card, because that's going to reduce your density. And you'll need to work this out with your deck that you're playing, because this is going to be different for every deck. But if we use Chane as an example, which is obviously a very popular deck, you have Husk for 1 block, you have 2 cards from hand, say it's 2 attack, 2 cards from hand plus an equipment. You could also have then the next 2 cards be 2 non-attack cards plus your last equipment. So that's going to allow you to stop the combo from happening. And you can actually just lay this out. It's very easy. You can just go, okay, I know the Husk block's 6. They're not getting any buffs from either Centauri or Saber Boltyn. The next one I want to block with, you want to block with your attack actions last, because that's going to pump the attack. So next one you can block with the 2 non-attack actions from hand. Let's say it's 2 Seeds of Agony plus your Skull Cap. So that's going to get you to 5, which is going to, presuming you're on more life, that's going to stop the next Saber. And then on the last one, which again, if you can block the 3rd one, they're not going to be able to go off again. Come in, you throw 2 attack actions plus your Grasp of the Arknight that's blocking for 8. This is going to get pumped to 7 because Saber Boltyn and the Centauri Saber effect on attack action, but you're still going to block that out, and then they're going to be done. They're not going to be able to attack again. So yeah, a bit long-winded there, Brendan, but it is important to explain the turn structure, because it can get quite involved. But once you understand exactly what they're doing, it's very easy to identify which cards to block when.
Yeah, I just want to quickly note as well that these Snapdragon Scalers would actually be popped on the Bolt of Courage.
Sorry,
That's how
yes.
they would give that go again.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
Snapdragon Scalers, that is the function in the deck, is when you go off on that turn, likely they will pop Snapdragon Scalers for that first attack.
Yes.
You notice that Hayden, when he talks about blocking out these turns against the Bolton players, say they do have the 3 cards in Soul, you're able to avoid the combo if you're playing a deck like Chane very easily. There's one key thing, though. I know we talked about preserving life total. Do not block with your armor early. Do not block unnecessarily. There's pretty much nothing in the game that is necessary outside of blocking out this turn as much as possible. So there is a potential to, like, if you're going to be on higher life than them, it's almost if you're on lower life. If you're on lower life than the Bolton player at this point, you're able to block with 2 Skull Cap. You're probably already losing the game.
Yeah.
So if you try to get an early block with Skull Cap on to get a block for 2, just keep in mind that when the combo comes, you're probably not going to be able to block with it, and it's pretty critical. So don't block with armor if you can. Save it for this. So Hayden, let's assume we're the Chane player here. We are able to block, these 3 Centauri Sabers. If we're not, it's still not the end of the world. Or even if we do get hit with the end of that Saber, we need to talk about what the Bolton player is going to try to do after they do this combo. So this deck is definitely kind of predicated on going off with these Luminas, hitting with the Sabers, gaining a bunch of life, getting a bunch of cards in Soul. There's 2 kind of paths they can take after that game, and the one that catches most Chane players off guard is that they will just fatigue you. So if you're playing Chane, you're probably not siding for Bolton to fatigue you from the very start. Maybe you are, maybe you're playing a hedge board, but if you're not, they'll get you low with the Saber attack to also gain a ton of life, and then they'll just straight up fatigue you, because we're probably on turn 4 or 5, and that's a good thing for them if we're getting it off by then. We're on turn 4 or 5, you're on Shackle 4 or 5, and you've probably not set up the bottom of your deck. You're just maximizing pressure. You're trying to go as fast as possible, and then they could just, they'll just block you out. You're going to be taking 1 damage from Husk every turn at least, because you blocked with their Husk on the Saber turn, and then you can end up just getting ticked down, not have threat density on the bottom of your deck, and get fatigued. There is an option 2, which is also probably a totally legit option, which you'll see a lot, depends on your life total, and kind of depends on the threat density left in your deck. But that's if they just play a mid-range game against you, play like kind of a normal Bolton game, and they'll likely be able to heavily utilize cards like Celestial Cataclysm because they got so many cards into Soul by hitting with those Sabers early. So be aware of those 2 play patterns. The combo, by no means, especially if it looks like this, say they have the 4th card in Soul, you weren't able to block it out, you got hit by it, it's so beatable as Chane still. It's super, super beatable. You just have to be prepared for the game that's going to come after, and you need to be able to manage your life total and manage your deck threat density.
Yeah, it really comes down to the pressure that you put on before they get to the combo turn. If your opponent's below, like 15 for the Bolton players, like I think another key kind of break point I see, if they're sort of, significantly below, you've put them a turn below that 15. So, on their last turn, they start at 15. You can get them very close to being dead, if not presenting lethal, which can actually bust up their combo. But even if they start at 15, you get them down to like single digits. If you're able to block out 3 attacks, they're going to be able to gain up 6 life with double Lumina. Go back to sort of, around like maybe 14 or something. And if you're sort of sitting around 5 or 6, there's a chance that you can still bring this game back. No lie though, like the double Lumina turn is pretty scary. But they do have to set it up pretty quickly, because if you're able to put on a lot of pressure with this, you're a Katsu aggro deck, you're a Chane deck, whatever it might be, even a Bravo deck just throwing, attack actions with crush effects at them, this can be quite difficult for them. I do just want to, Brendan, if you don't mind, go back, because we did talk about the 4 cards Soul on the turn, but we didn't talk about the 5 card, which is a 4 card at the start of the turn. So basically, if you have the exact same hand we just talked about, so you have the Beacon of Victory and the Lumina, which is very common, if you actually start the turn with the 4 card Soul, you're not going to be able to block this one out effectively, because this gives them the extra card in Soul that they need, that on that 3rd Saber attack. So the first card gets committed to the Beacon, but then these next 3 get committed to their first 3 Saber attacks, and so you would need to block out 4 Saber attacks in order for them to not be able to get the go again, because they're going to go, first one, go again, second one, go again. Sorry, including the charge card for the turn, so they'll go to 5, so they'll have the extra card as well. Third one, go again, and then you're going to need to block out the 4th one now as well, because they have the extra card in Soul. And generally, unless you've got like multiple defense reactions in your hand, again, you can go and model this out with your decks what this looks like. It's pretty easy to do. They're going to be able to give the 4th one go again, and it would have already hit and filled their Soul back up with minimum 1 card. They got 2 Lumina, a lot of light cards in the deck, probably just going to get 2 cards and just be able to keep going off. So yeah, it's a bit of a catch 22. You can actually, what you can do is you can block out those first 3, even if they start their turn with the 4 cards in soul. Block out the first 3, and then hope that they miss on the last one. It's to be honest, it's very unlikely, but you can play to that if you're just going to be dead to the combo anyway. You can play to that line. One thing I did want to talk about as well, the other kind of iteration of this is if they don't have the beacon, but they just have the natural Lumina, then 3 cards at the start of turn will be enough because they don't have to burn 1 card to a beacon to go and find it. So it's basically the same thing, except now that when they get that 4th card, all these cards get used on the Centauri Sabers. So when that 4th card hits, that 4th Saber hits, they're still able to give it go again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to note some kind of heuristics and counterplay here. So it is generally kind of a race, but I think that, you know, if you are playing a deck like Chane or Agricotsu, you're actually favored in this race. I think that once you get to kind of turns 3, 4, obviously it depends on what their soul looks like. You need to be. It's really important to present lethal every turn. We've seen that this, you know, how dangerous this combo is, but there is one key ingredient, and that's that they are going to need their hand. They're going to need the resources. So it's a very intensive combo to pull off. And if you are able to threaten lethal on the turn that they're going to try to pull it off, they literally just can't do it. It's pretty bad. So we talked about not blocking early with armor, making sure you're blocking effectively on the combo. You need to know how many cards it takes to go off. We've detailed that quite a bit. So just keep that in your mind, kind of always have that at the forefront, and you'll understand where the game is going and, you know, what stage you're at pretty much any time you're playing. And then also counterplays if you do get hit. The combo is not the end of the world. It is the end of the world if you get hit with triple Lumina, but that's a different story, and that's kind of just getting high rolled. But if you do get hit by the combo and they are able to, you know, hit you with 4 sabers or 3 sabers, it's not the end of the world. You can totally bring the game back. If you've been managing your life total up until now, you probably won't die to fatigue or blood debt. Let's say we're playing Chane. And then also if they're playing the mid-range build, you're kind of just going to have to go tit for tat. A couple things that I just want to note that I do usually against Bolton is that I will pop my Snapdragon Scalers mostly for tempo and damage. If I have a really good Snapdragon Scalers turn on turn 3, that's just going to output a lot of damage, I'm going to do that. I want to be putting out as much damage as possible, as fast as possible before they're able to pull out the turn. So don't be afraid to use the scalers. Hayden, any other kind of heuristics you have when playing against the Bolton deck?
Yeah, there's one more line I do want to talk about, which is this comes down to this like putting pressure on them, is that on the turn that they go off, if you have been able to take a card from their hand, maybe because you have the CNC on the right turn and they have to block with their 5 equipment plus a card from hand, they're going to end up with, you know, with a 4-carder effectively, probably 1 Lumina and an Arsenal, and you know their charge 0 charge card plus a card they need to charge. This gives them no resources to pop Gallantry Gold. So one of the really important things is when you see a card like Bolt of Courage come in, where they're going to try and force a card draw. There's a little bit of a game you need to play here. So let's just run it through. So they have this card. They have one of these Luminas in Arsenal, the other one's in hand. They come with the Bolt of Courage. They charge to their 4th card. Now, it's actually almost always correct to block this card for 5. I'll explain that in 1 second, depending on the cards they have in soul. Or 4, depending. So you want to block this out, or plus 1, I'm saying it, because if you use an attack action, it's going to get the buff from Saber Boltyn. But if you allow them to draw the card off this, so if they get to Snapdragon this, draw the card, they're now going to draw the card they need for their resources for Gallantry Gold. So effectively, what you're doing by blocking this is you're actually denying them from, 6 attack, effectively, by blocking the Bolt of Courage. And if you use an equipment, say it's like a 2 defense equipment, they're actually going to have to break the chain in order to be able to set off with their Lumina anyway. And that's going to allow you to use that equipment a second time. So that's really important. And the way you can sort of look at this is the cards they have in soul. So if we go back to this play with the Bolt of Courage charging, if they start with 3 cards in soul and going to 4, we already know that this means that if they beacon a victory, you can block them out. So in that case, you might think, okay, well, if I let the Bolt of Courage hit, they draw the card. If it's a beacon in hand, I know they're going to go down to 3 cards and I'm going to be able to block it out, which is perfectly reasonable. But you're taking a bit of a gamble. So I would say in general, the Bolt of Courage, when they don't have the resource to Gallantry Gold, I would just block that because like Brendan said, as the game goes on, you can still bring this game back. You can still be able to, if you've got enough of a life lead early, then you're probably okay to maybe swing it back. But yeah, because if they only have those 4 cards once they've charged, so starting the turn with 3 cards, the beacon is going to bring them down to 3, and then if you can block out the 3 saber, there's not much they can do about that, unfortunately. So yeah, bit of a thing to look at there is just the cards they have in hand and versus whether this card is important. It's the same with actually Express Lightning. So Express Lightning is kind of similar, but it would be with a 5-card hand. So if they have the 5-card hand and they have the Express Lightning charging, they're going to go to 4. If it hits, it's going to go to 5, which would mean that if they have Beacon, they're definitely going to be able to do it. So sometimes you have to take a bit of this is the hardest part of this game, to be honest, when you're playing against Bolton Sabers, is working out what do you think they likely have in hand and what cards you should play around. Like, should you play around the Beacon buff on the attack action, or should you just not worry about it? Just try and say, if you've got it, you've got it, and I'm going to try and block out your Sabers. So it's probably the hardest part, I would say, Brendan. Once you get the sort of basics down, you can be very good at blocking it. You can understand what they're doing, but this part will always be a bit more difficult.
Yeah, and you said Express Lightning there.
Sorry, Engulfing Light is what I mean to say. Sorry, apologies. Engulfing Light. We'll make sure the right card got brought up at that part there. Engulfing Light, the one that puts the extra card into. So mixing around my names with Bolton there. Definitely Engulfing Light. I want to make sure
I wasn't going to mess you up. One last tip from me as the Chane player. So if I'm not able to block out the combo, which happens all the time, and you're able to come back like we talked about, I do usually opt to keep 1 blue in hand if I can, if I'm not going to die. The reason for that is that you're likely going to be on Shackle 4, Shackle 5. So you're going to be flipping likely quite a few blood depth, and you're going to want to clear it. But more importantly, off of 1 blue card, you can come in for 8 damage quite frequently. So that's going to look like Seeds, Ghostly Visit, Shackle, Nebula Blade for 4. That's pretty good. And then you're also going to be clearing out a few blood dead by keeping that blue. It's usually more advantageous than actually blocking for an additional 2 damage, which is likely what your blue is doing anyway. But that's the last kind of heuristic for me. I just want to kind of reiterate, guys, this deck is really popular. It is really scary if you haven't played against it before. But the deck is very, very, it's very beatable. And I think that one of its worst matchups is actually Chane, which is the deck that it's currently bullying. So if you're headed to Vegas, we're going to try to put this video up before then. I do expect there to be a lot of Bolton heading into Vegas, considering its results this past week in Europe and America.
Yeah.
But yeah, I recommend you get a few reps on it. But most importantly, you just got to understand how the combo works, understand what's going on in the game, kind of play both sides of the table, and you'll likely be able to see when the combo's going off from kind of a mile away.
Yeah, I like what you said as well, Brendan. Just before we close it out, the blue card, like, that is super important in the Chane build, for instance. You just weigh up, basically, can I block out the Sabers? You might need that blue card to just block out the Sabers and kill their turn completely. So you're just working out, if you can kill their turn out completely, you should always do that. If you can stop the third Saber and halve their attacks and their whole combo's done, then you should do it. Because sometimes they just have to go for it and just hope you block badly, or you overblock for the beacon and they don't have the beacon, they just have the double Lumina and they blow you out, whatever. Like, there's a bit of that's the game I was talking about earlier. They're just going to sometimes have to go for it. And like playing against Runthier, you're just going to have to try and work out what card, what attack reaction, or what set of cards they have, which is super important. I actually got completely blown out by this deck in Road to Nationals on Saturday, actually, for my winning into top 8. Ended up bubbling on 9th on my Saturday Road to Nationals. Basically, playing a friend of mine from our local scene, who turn 4 triple luminated me for a nice 40 plus damage, and unfortunately that was the game. So it can happen. That's a very low percentage chance for them to have the triple lumina. I think it's by turn 4. I think it's like a couple of percent. I think when you go and look at the statistics, it's really, really low, even with the beacons. But yeah, it's an interesting deck. Just try and lay it out. Try and think how you play against it. We've given you a few tips here, and I think that'll help people understand how to actually play into this deck. Or from the flip side, if you are interested in playing this deck, I think as we've laid it out here, it does tell you about some of those rules of thumb about 3 versus 4 cards, about your cards you're charging with, and about your beacon versus your Lumina turns.
Awesome. Well, we hope you enjoyed this video on the Bolton Saber combo deck, and good luck to everyone competing in the upcoming calling here in a few days. We will see you all in the next video.
Best of luck, guys. See ya.